What's going on, beautiful J4 family? Welcome to another edition of Dad's Talk. Historically, we have two dads chopping it up around a range of subjects, but in classic form, this is a solo dolo. So glad to be here with you all on a Sunday. Hope your weekend was great, that your Sunday is chill, that you went through your basic Sunday routine of cleaning up and had your cup of coffee, was just seasoned, not seasoned, but sweetened just right, that you have your music playing, and that it's a good day to quote Ice Cube. So today I want to continue on the theme of biracial children, particularly moms and dads raising biracial children, the importance of grounded, healthy young men kind of coming of age in a space and time and era where biracial is something vastly different than when I was going through my own cultural struggle, identity struggle, trying to figure out what it means to be biracial. I was born in 1968. It was a different time. About 1% of the human family were considered biracial or multiracial. To where today in 2020, that percentage is upwards of 17%. And to be quite honest, there's been some interest here in the YouTube space around the subject matter of biracial. It's been one of our more popular themes. I did a session with Gene Boyd recently called White Mothers and Their Black Biracial Sons. Got a lot of traction, a lot of feedback, a lot of comments. Appreciate the community for that. And then recently I did a piece around our biracial kids still black. And that was sort of tongue in cheek in response to a YouTube video I came across where a young man emphatically was saying that biracial kids are not black, and he made some legitimate kinds of arguments. He kind of closed out his thoughts and comments with maybe socially, or i.e. culturally, they could be considered black, but that they ought to stand firm in their biracial identity. As someone who went through an awkwardness trying to figure things out, and then decided upon graduating high school that I was not going to be in the proverbial gray. That world was too small for me, that I was going to actually land in a blackness, and did that with high intentionality uh, when I began college. But I certainly understand that it's a different time, a different era. If you look at 2010, about 9 million kids identified as two or more races. Today, that's upwards of 33 million. In 2020, a 276% increase in the number of born biracial or multiracial children. And quite frankly, that's 50 some years later. And so, absolutely, the evolution, the scholarship around biracialness, the growth, the community, just more access to people who may share a common duality or duplicity in their heritage makeup, it kind of raises the question. However, beautiful family, has been my experience that biracial kids, particularly black, white biracial kids, still tend to lean culturally towards the black side. If you identify as biracial and culturally biracial, beautiful, 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 beautiful. If you are biracial and lean towards more of a whiteness, hey, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And if you are like most folks, myself included, where you have any sort of phenotype representation of blackness, in this case, it was my hair prior to going bald, we tended to seek community membership, social space, social connectivity within a black kind of American diasporic kind of touch. And so it differs for everyone. It differs for everyone. And so today I just kind of want to acknowledge that there's a lot going on in these biracial streets. There's folks on YouTube who are kind of speaking around it. But the number is growing, so it legitimizes and validates the question. What's going on, D-Chap? Good to see you. I know you're out there in China. It's early in the morning. We might bring you up here in a little bit. For folks joining in, thank you guys so much. Truly appreciate you coming in. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to throw those in the chat. I would definitely like to know if you are a parent of a biracial kid, if you are yourself a biracial kid, to get a sense of, what's on your spirit, what's on your mind, what's on your hearts, and particularly parents who are raising young children or teenagers who are going through this phase of identity, immersion, and understanding. It's critically important that you guys let them grapple with this, let them sort of struggle with it, but also be an open love source for them, so that they can come to you, whether you're the white parent or the parent of color, and just sort of talk it out, vibe it out, and have a sounding board with their love source in the parent. So today I want to dedicate this episode. I want to dedicate this episode to the biracial kid that looks out of place in black spaces. All right. You all have been around black events perhaps, and you notice this standing sort of on the margins of the happenings, sort of stepping back, that there's this awkwardness that you can see in a biracial kid that just looks out of place, y'all. He looks out of place and doesn't quite feel that they're a part of the blackness that is going on at that particular moment. Admittedly, I've been that kid. I've been that kid with the awkward haircut. Used to comb my hair forward, in black spaces, just observing intensely as to what the nuance is all about. I grew up in a military environment, predominantly white, but also in small, intimate circles of of biracial kids, to black fathers, enlisted men married to Korean, French, German kinds of mothers. And we had our own insulated little social circle, but it had always been kind of in the space of whiteness. And so on a few occasions at that time when I was immersed in blackness, I felt this awkwardness. I felt this uncertainness, this kind of an outsider who didn't quite know how to be, didn't quite know how to be in that particular space. And so Baby, a part of my own identity was not enjoying, not quite liking that awkwardness that I was experiencing in that particular moment. And so at a very young age, around 15, my parents divorced at 16. And at that moment, I began to live with my dad, and he went through his black renaissance period, and I began to see it from the lens of my father. And through his port of interest, through his ushering, I then had a sort of a cultural home that I could grow in and discover. And that's one thing about biracial kids, y'all. Biracial kids, because we know we are not 100% anything, we feel on the margins of all things, and we're always observing and always watching. To say it differently, we're studying, right? They always say the convert knows more about the religion than the person that was born into it, right? I think that same application applies in terms of blackness, right? Light-skinned kids who are looking for membership and studying and observing, they tend to have a little bit more study and observation and nuanced understanding of the predominant culture that they're seeking membership in, because they're perpetually studying to kind of see how they can fit in and understand it. They're always analyzing it, to where I don't know if that's the case for someone who was born of the community. You just kind of take it for granted, sort of a fish in water. But biracial kids are a little different in that regard, that they're constantly mining the environment, mining the cultural that they have high interest in, to understand it so they can seek ways to gain membership in it. So I want to devote this episode to the dedicated to the biracial kid or teen that just looks awkward in black spaces, and hopefully offer some recommendations or thoughts to help you better navigate that and to find a home, to find membership in a black community that does ultimately want to embrace you, from my experience, but they're really checking you out. They're kind of checking you out. And that's something I want to kind of begin with here. In all the talk and fun and sort of social commentary around biracial kids and black identity, do they belong? Are they a part of black culture, right? All the angst that they feel in their social circles around pressure or perceptions of membership, which are very important in terms of self-validation for young girls, young boys, all in that teenage set. You're just trying to fit in amongst a group of your peers, but then you throw color nuance and dynamics into that. You throw hair dynamics nuance in that. You throw appearance and those kind of things. And oh my goodness, I can imagine the frustration that beautiful young people are going through. But it is undeniable, y'all. It is undeniable. For a light-skinned kid, you have to understand that the gatekeepers, and maybe y'all will disagree with this, the gatekeepers of admission into a blackness is going to be your peer black group. The gatekeepers, y'all, for interracial children to get into a black cultural membership is specifically the peer group that you are a member of, that you're seeking membership in. D-Chap, I just put the StreamYard link in. I'd like your thoughts on Black peer groups being the gatekeepers as to whether or not biracial kids can gain membership, right? That's an interesting thing because you're taking the identity membership of a 13 or 14-year-old, and that is at the whim, the discretion, the interpretation of other 13-year-olds who might be monolithically black. So it's a very interesting thing. But it's been my experience that as biracial kids, when we're trying to be a part of the group, right? Be a part of the neighborhood crew, be a part of the sport team, be a part of the class, participation levels. We are doing it understanding that we're seeking validation from our peer group who are black. That is a reality. So the first thing, awkward young black man, awkward young black teen trying to find a way to sort of land culturally is you have to understand you got to have proximity to black folk. D Chap says, great point. I see my 18-year-olds growing up, studying, observing, analyzing how to fit in. She navigated well, fortunately, and has a variety of friends, both black and white, and identifies with both. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yes, biracial kids, because of family structure, because of things that they have access to, naturally will have more of a multicultural kind of experience. And to seek cultural membership, a sense of self and blackness, does not trump nor negate to be biracial, in the sense that you have a love and a respect for both your parents' lineage, and that shows in your confidence, that shows in your conversation, it shows in your friendships, it shows in your social circles and those kind of things. So absolutely, have a friend base that represents the human family. But I'm also recommending that should you choose to have a cultural footing, you're definitely going to also have to have a closer proximity in some spaces, in some aspect of your life, to the people who are essentially validating your membership in a blackness initially. And then once you've kind of gained the confidence of culture, you then move out and move as you want to into the rest of the society in different kind of circles with an identity firmly entrenched that you authenticate and self-validate. But that comes through trials, that comes through peer interaction, and ultimately peer acceptance. All right. All right. So, beautiful young people, your peer group is looking to see how do you move in this space? Do you understand the talk, the banter, the play of appropriate age set? Are you sort of comfortable in understanding the cultural nuances and ways and rhythms of your peer group, right? They're looking to see, do you have an interest? Do you have a want? Do you have a desire to sort of be a part of that particular peer group, right? And they're mining arrogance. I really think they're sort of mining arrogance. Are you coming into that space with a loftiness, with an arrogance about you, with a perception of I'm better than y'all, right? It may not be articulated like that, and you have got young people trying to interpret it, but they're looking to see, hey, are you seeking to become a part of us, or are you bringing in sort of so-called light-skinned stereotypes that they're sort of guarding against and are sort of testing you, right? They're testing you. The one thing when I would move into certain spaces, I was very quiet. I was very shy. I didn't say much, and so I didn't give a sense of my leanings culturally one way or the other because I was very shy, very quiet when I was in my early teens, and I had found that if I was quiet, as long as I would go along and I wasn't trying to push back or make any kind of pronouncement around race, kind of keep it real neutral, that eventually perhaps a more charismatic leader in my age set, or particularly a girl or something like that, would kind of bring me in the group, right? Bring me in the group and just give me a chance to sort of be a little bit closer to the circle and just always sort of watching and observing. Again, just an awkward biracial kid, combing his hair forward, very quiet, just trying to figure out life. I had kind of an existence that flourished in a military kind of base, lived in base housing. But in eighth grade, I then moved off base housing and moved into public education. And so I was going to school in Las Vegas at a school called Jim Bridger, and Jim Bridger had a lot of black folk. It was a Crip school, and so I had to navigate all this kind of stuff, and it was very, very eye opening. All right, granddad's in the house. Got in line back from church. Hey, granddad, good to see you. I'm just reminiscing about Jim Bridger, and so I was always just trying to figure this thing out, and it was the embrace of my peer group. I was a cross country runner. I was a track runner, softball. They had that in the military at Jim Bridger at the time, and so I was able to kind of at least hold my own in terms of sports. Kind of kept my mouth, kind of kept myself quiet. Typically girls might bring, kind of show a little attention, and so I had a little kind of okay, there's some acceptance here. But it was my peer group that brought me in, and I was highly intentional about just keeping things neutral. I had diverse friends, military-based friends, white friends, but I always wanted to make sure that I also had proximity to Blackness because I was always curious about that. And as I mentioned in previous videos, I always knew that there was a pathway into Blackness, one that I had not seen nor felt nor experienced in terms of my white peer group. As previously mentioned, my white peer group could always outgroup me, typically around my hair, as young kids do in silly kinds of ways. But there was always a pathway into Black familia, into Black family. But the gatekeepers were my Black peer group, and they were the ones that ultimately decided to bring me in. So I want to talk to you about some different things to teach your sons and daughters if they are interested in becoming a part of a Black nuclear core, a Black family, a Black culture, a Black social setting. Then here's some sort of strategies. So I'm gonna bring my man D Chap in. I think he's in here. Let me see. Add to the stream. Let's see. D Chap. I don't see your picture just yet. Thank you guys for joining us. If you guys are from a biracial background, either as parents or children yourself, or grown or young, feel free to let me know. Would love to hear your thoughts on how you've transitioned into a cultural comfortness with Blackness, because there are strategies. You have to be very intentional. Otherwise, you'll be not only a biracial Black awkward teen in Black spaces, but you'll be a grown person, in a biracial grown person in awkward spaces. All right. So the first thing I'd like to recommend, mom and dad, make sure your baby's hair game is tight. Make sure your baby's hair game is tight. As I mentioned, I used to comb my hair forward. It wasn't until my 8th grade teacher, Mr. Gilchrist, an Omega Psi Phi, said, man, what's up with your hairdo? And he pulled me to the side and said, man, you need to get you a shag. And the shag, for those of y'all who aren't familiar with 1980s hairstyle, but it would be very low in the front, and then it would kind of go low in the back, would begin to grow. So your back ends would grow long, and it was low, and then it would kind of progressively. It wasn't a fade; it would progressively get longer in the back. And the shag was the thing back in the day, y'all. And when I got my shag, man, you literally talk about a change in how I felt, how I walked, how I kind of moved. When I was shy, I was kind of in the cut, didn't want people looking at me, right? But when I got my shag, I was like, oh, I was kind of peacocking. I was kind of flapping my wings, man, because hair, for biracial kids, I imagine all kids, but hair is the symbol of your biracialness, right? The fact that especially as light skinned as I am, but hair is your announcement to the world that, hey, I'm a biracial kid. I got multiracial family dynamics in my background, right? And what is the pronunciation of that, particularly when you're very light skinned, you lack in the melanin game? It's your hair, right? And so my hair was the announcement to the world that I had some Blackness. And when I got that shag, it was an announcement to the world that not only do I have some Blackness, but I want to experience this thing. I want to kind of, go be amongst the people. I want to go see what this is about. And I got a little less awkward, man. So parents, make sure you find out, particularly white moms raising Black kids, if you're doing that by yourself, go to a colleague, go to a friend, whatever the case may be, or heck, go to Google or just search Black barbershops. There's nothing more pronunciating of awkwardness when you're looking at whether it's at church or the mosque or a birthday party, something where there's a large cluster of black folk and everybody kind of got their own hairstyle. But then you got that awkward biracial kid that typically just has it evenly cut all around. Maybe there's a little bit of braids going on. I don't know, but you can tell that sometimes there's a disconnect between the parent and realizing that they're biracial kids. Symbol of blackness and comfort is in their hair, and that you got to be due diligence. You got to be real on point about getting that baby's hair to sort of be of the times, right? All the, hairstyles change, right? But whatever it is, go to the barbershop. Barbershop will know what it is. Go to the beauty salon. Talk to the sisters. Hey, this is my baby. This is what we're thinking here. This is her hair type. What is it we need to do to kind of bring her up to speed? I tell you, one thing that my daughter obsesses on is her hair. She's biracial presenting. I'm learning new terminology. So she's about as light as I am. My wife, her mother is black, but obviously not obviously, but a little darker than I am, and she's kind of inherited the light skinness on my side, and she too kind of moves through spaces. Although she's percentagely more black than I am, she still presents biracial, and her identity is largely spinning around her hair, and so she goes through braids. She went through something where you put something in your hair. Right now, she's kind of wearing it curly, which I like and I prefer. But I can't underestimate what it means for young people to have hair that presents outwardly in a way that makes them feel good about themselves, that they have gained a sense of self-esteem from their hair. And that is very important for young teenagers to feel as if they are on par with their peer group, right? And that's largely done around their hair. So mom and dad, Google barber, talk to somebody that has a fresh cut, ask them where they went, but don't let your baby be in some 1970s kind of hairstyle when the rest of the world is in 22. All right, don't do that to your babies, y'all. Don't do that to your baby. Take your baby to the barber shop or the beauty salon. Beautiful family, how you guys doing? If you're just joining me, thank you. I see you all. Love to know if you all have had biracial experiences, tragedies, triumphs, whatever the case may be. There's a lot going on in these YouTube streets around biracialness. Somebody out there saying we ain't black. I don't know what's going on, y'all. Saying we ain't black. Uh, all right, so aesthetics, appearance, right? Hair. The other piece is clothes. The other piece is clothes, right? Every culture has a way of sort of dressing. Um, I remember when I got a job when I was 16, bagging groceries at the commissary, had some good money. Went to the BX it had some clothes and whatnot, but I remember discovering the malls and those kind of things. But I was always mindful of kind of what are the fashion trends, right? And how did I want to present myself in a way that was not flamboyant? I wasn't a big brand wearer. I tried to kind of keep things neutral, but I wanted to have an aesthetic, a clothes aesthetic that was lined up with my age set that also would not garnish me ridicule among my black peer group, right? And so, I invested, some of my little nickels and dimes and change into if Reebok was kind of what they were wearing in white on whites, I got me them white on white Reeboks. Levi's were a big time thing, so I had to get out of the Jordans that I bought from Zodi's or whatever the place was. Had to get me some Levi's, right? OP, Ocean Pacific, was something back in my high school time. So I had myself color coordinated with the belts, right? And so, have a little bit of discretion with your biracial children when they go to the mall, right? Talk to them. What is it? Look around, see what their peer groups are wearing, and make sure that they too have something in the category of what the young people are wearing these days, because that's all a part of aesthetics, how you present yourself, and appearance for all human beings, but particularly for the teenage age set, is critically important. All right. So those are two dynamics. Get that baby's haircut in the 21st century, and get that young man or lady some attire, some gear, where they can walk around their peers and be the subject of conversation. Oh, girl, where'd you get that? Man, where you get them Nikes at? Man, where you get them Adidas, right? So the other thing too, as an aside, shoe game is big The shoe game is big in youth culture. Black culture is no exception to that. So if you really want to, I'm tripping a little bit, but if you really want to help your son or daughter's popularity, focus in on their shoe game. I work at a university. We're sponsored by Adidas, so I have a lot of access to Adidas gear. I make sure that my kids have access to Adidas gear, and so the percentage of Adidas they have compared to an average, shoe inventory for a person in the age set. Theirs is a little higher, and actually one of my sons actually became school president over a period of time. But all of his conversation and his ability to break into different kind of social circles was talked about. Okay, what Adidas you coming out with now, right? And so he was able to flip his shoe game into some popularity that he then transitioned into some leadership opportunities. I'm not saying go buck wild in the shoe game. I'm just underscoring and emphasizing a person's pathway into identity is largely tied to how they fare in terms of aesthetics, hair, attire, shoe game, whatever the case may be. So those are two things I'd recommend parents. Families, if y'all have recommendations, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'd appreciate to see what you all have. D Chap says, I think that curiosity comes from being around your dad. True. Without him, you could have gone a different route. Yeah. Where we are today, where we are today in the space of culture is tied to where we were yesterday, right? And as people's current reality are what they are, that is inherent in what you ultimately become. My pathway was a divorce, um, then living with my dad having a black renaissance, me following that, making a choice very early on to live in a blackness, and then achieving that in college. That is correlated by me not having to struggle between honoring both a white European mother and a black Creole father, because at one point my mother was no longer physically in the home. I had also mentioned that that I had some stressors with my mother, and so right or wrong, I kind of sort of navigated that differently, which probably further moved me towards my parental love support, because in many ways he was a savior figure for me. And so, yeah, the bond to my dad also helped significantly shape my identity. And that's why I also realized if biracial kids are living in two parent homes, they struggle or question things differently. If they're living with the white mom, then there's a reality there. But regardless, I'd recommend that parents are intentional about exposing their children to all the heritage that they represent. I was fortunate enough to live in Italy as a part of my dad's military experience. And a part of that living in Italy, we would catch the train to France to go visit my mother's family. And so I had a chance to immerse myself at a young age in French culture. My grandfather is a Muslim man from Algeria. And so there was talk about that. I knew there was an Algerian presence, certainly knew there was a French Catholic presence. And then I was able to sort of interface with French cousins, just throughout the years, sort of coming of age. But yeah, I was able to land solidly in a black male space, and that has sort of put a premium on my life. And that much of my work is with black men in terms of their development in the coming of age process. I really never thought much about the biracial conversation because I'd already answered that question for myself until again we said I did that we did the YouTube episode, and there was a lot of feedback and a lot of traction. So as I said before, I just didn't know. I didn't know that that this was a major theme, right? So that was kind of my own racial obscurity and blindsidedness, and so I'm glad to kind of be playing with this conversation a little bit. Trying to get D Chap in this box. We'll get him in here eventually. Beautiful family. If you guys are have any questions, please feel free to share them. So aesthetics. The other piece is sports, y'all. Sports. Sports are not only healthy in terms of development. Sports are also ways in which peers kind of gauge each other, and they create appropriate levels of banter, play, hierarchy, acceptance, challenge, proving oneself, right? That's all a part of the social evolution of young people, right? But it also is a place where you could be challenged and you can demonstrate competency or you can demonstrate effort. You can praise, you can applaud, right? It actually takes the nuances of human beings together, and it gives them constructive opportunities and activities by which to demonstrate usefulness, to demonstrate belonging, to demonstrate relevancy, right? And so any kid gains membership into a social order or a social circle by demonstrating relevance and benefit to the group, right? They demonstrate benefit and loyalty to the group, and the group in return rewards them for showing some sense of benefit and loyalty to the group, right? So for biracial kids, assuming you're in sports that involve people of color or multicultural kinds of groups, which almost every sport does, that's a way of holding your own and having a sense of place, having a sense of place and space within a multicultural setting to include your Black peer group and culturally learning and watching and understanding how young people banter and play, which is all a part of the authenticity that's tied to a culture, in this case, Black culture. All right. All right. So aesthetics and sport. The other piece is teach your beautiful babies about cultural cachet, right? To be in the know and to have an opinion about it, right? Cultural cachet, the language, the commonalities, the vocabulary, the importance, the frivolousness, whatever it is. But all 14-year-olds, all 17-year-olds, all 11-year-olds have something that is culturally cachet for them, meaning that it is the thing. It is the thing that to know about, to have an opinion about, to have experience with. Make sure that in addition to whatever they specialize in or whatever their hobbies or passions or interests are, that they also are becoming worldly, that they're being exposed to different things so that when they're bantering with their friends, when they're bantering with their peer group, they can understand cultural inferences, they can understand cultural passions, and they can hear, listen, contribute, and have their own opinion, right? When you have your own opinion and your own voice, and you can playfully, in an age appropriate kind of way, argue and criticize and agree and tease, right? That's all a part of back and forth play among young peer groups, both young women and young men. So they have to have cultural cachet to be in the know, all right? The easiest one is sports, right? Do you have an opinion on LeBron James? Do you have an opinion on Kylie Irving? Do you have an opinion on Tiger Woods? Do you have an opinion on Serena Williams? I don't know, right? So, mom and dad, your biracial kid might not be into sports, but set them down, right? If you're one of the parents is a sport enthusiast, bring little man in, bring little daughter in, and set them down and chop it up. Maybe you drive and listen to sport radio, whatever the case may be, but just let them hear it, right? Let them hear it. Let them develop a favorite team. Let them uh, join a social media circle around something like that, but just put them in the know, right? And through this cultural cachet, we don't know when it'll come or how it'll come, but they're going to find themselves, something will come down the road. They heard something and they can repeat it, and the young man knows a little something. Okay, I see you, right? That's all about building credibility for the age set. And then if you're doing that in proximity of Black folk, when you're a biracial kid, that just gives you further entry. And ultimately, you no longer feel like you're seeking membership. You just become. You just become. You look consistent with your peers. You can hold your own in sort of friendly competitive spaces, and you know the talk. You know the talk, right? Sports is an easy way to do this. Music, who's the latest artist, who's coming in town, what's the concert, right? What's the latest video, what's on Spotify, right? Encourage them to have a diverse catalog of music that they're exposed to include your oldies but goodies, but also to include their contemporary music. I wouldn't be too concerned about censoring their music. Let them listen to what the age set is listening to. Let them repeat the lyrics. Let them kind of do the latest dance, whatever the case may be, because that is all cultural cachet. Just like you built memories around music appropriate to your time, movies appropriate to your time, let your beautiful seeds do the same thing. And that's all about exposure, exposure, exposure. The benefit of them having these exposure to these cultural cachet moments is that they pop up and they give you currency when you're dialoguing with your peer group in unpredicted and unscheduled kind of ways. And then finally, if there's something of a racial nature, right, something that's going on in the sphere, something of uh, I don't know, some racial incident, whatever the case may be, I would recommend that you don't shield your children from that. They're talking about it. They got different kind of vocabulary for it. If anything, of the last 2 years has taught us that young people are attuned to social justice kinds of issues. It's transcending race. It's a highly diverse space. There's a lot of optimism and passion around it, and that we ought to encourage our beautiful babies to explore it, right? To understand the narrative, what's going on, to understand the different opinions of it. They'll naturally inherit kind of what your opinion is of it, but as they grow and get more exposure, they'll eventually land on their own intellectual feet, their own evaluative feet, and then they'll come up with their own decision. Even if their conclusions are perhaps not along a black block norm, right? Kind of what is it generally that black folks believe, as long as they've established legitimacy and understand the nuance of membership, and they've demonstrated love and loyalty to the group, they can have differing opinions. It's when you come in without having established yourself critiquing that you often get outgrouped. So as an aside here, that's always what I thought about when young black kids are accused of acting white, right? Acting white, and then the following sentences because of your vocabulary or how you pronounce words. I don't think it's that, because I've seen many a smart, uh, black folk who have undeniable black membership and authenticity. To me, it's where you haven't established a sense of connection. You haven't established a sense of membership. You haven't went through peer rites of passage programs to gain a black authenticity that you then, if you have differing opinions or so-called things that are sort of outside the norm stereotypically of beautiful blackness, that you're ostracized. No, I think there's something about how you're perceived, right? If you approach it with a judgment, kind of a nose in the air approach to blackness, yeah, you're gonna get eaten up, right? You're gonna get eaten up. But if you have established love and loyalty, and then you're doing things that so-called aren't stereotypically black, which is increasingly becoming few and far in between, thankfully, that's when you might be vulnerable to critique. So that's an aside. Beautiful family, how you doing? Love the energy here. I'm seeing the boxes. Good to see some folks here. Love to get your questions if you all have them. What I'm doing is just kind of talking about different strategies parents can sort of tee up or observe for in helping your beautiful young children come of age, right? To move through teenage years in a healthy, balanced kind of way into young adulthood. But along the way, cultural themes and things that they could consider, that will further entrench them in a beautiful, healthy way in blackness. And then simultaneously, perhaps that is also occurring in a whiteness, although cultural whiteness is slightly different than cultural blackness. There's just something in the society from wake up to go to sleep where you pick up cultural whiteness, to where in cultural blackness you have to be a bit more intentional. All right. Social media cues, social media. Your beautiful sons and daughters probably have some form of social media. You're probably familiar with that to some extent, from close up or from afar. But encourage your young people to, if they come across things of a cultural nature and they see value in it, that they're sharing it, that they're liking it, right? If they're posing a selfie and they want to pose a selfie that's saying something about, their love and adoration for a particular artist or a particular aspect of the culture, right? Or it's a Martin Luther King Day or Malcolm X's birthday or Ida B. Wells' birthday or the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Topeka, whatever the case may be, let's throw that up there. Hey, shout out to Malcolm X, El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, right? But what it does is it shows that, hey, this person is a little attuned to something. They're attuned and they're co-signing on something of a cultural nature. And that would bring unspoken cachet and value to them because they'll be considered to be sort of in the know, to be in the know. And it's 2022. It's a new day. Hybrid ninjas. I feel you. I'd love to hear more on that. Don't quite know exactly with that, but you're absolutely right. It is a new day for biracial kids asking new questions. All right. So, assuming you're interested in a Black cultural home, along with social cues, but also, especially for biracial kids, and this was my pathway into a Blackness, was to know a little bit more about the collective Black cultural experience than average, right? And that would come out in conversations. It would come out in terms of presentations. It would come out in terms of sort of sidebar conversation with my friends. But if you sort of read and study, and especially with Google, you can research different things of a cultural nature. If you are sort of seen to as someone that knows more than average as it relates to Black history, Black nuance, Black cause and effect, then it gives you a certain kind of sort of reputation in that space. And as peers are sort of moving through, reputation is critical for their footing and standing among their peer group. But how do you define your reputation? What is your slice? What is your path in terms of reputation? For me, especially in early college years, it was at least being able to hold my own in general conversation around cultural themes. And in the late 80s, early 90s, the question of culture was very dominant. You know, that was the time of the X Hat. Spike Lee was putting out a lot of culturally provocative kind of content. That was the immersion of Black studies programs at different predominantly white institutions. And so I would, I would read. This was pre-internet. I would read a lot of King stuff, a lot of Malcolm stuff, a lot of Black nationalist kind of stuff. And so I understood the cultural clock, from arrival here to the United States in 1619, following the chattel enslavement period of concluding in 1863, 1865, Juneteenth. I knew a little bit about Reconstruction, and then the extended 60-year civil rights segregation of America, and then the passing of the 1964 civil rights legislation. And then I began to dabble a little bit in hip hop and those kind of things. So I was able to hold my own in terms of an historical awareness. All right, so let me pause here. Hybrid ninjas in the house. Things are not the same as it was in the 1970s, no doubt. It's our time to develop our own culture and identity. I see you. Hybrid ninjas, check out my session I just did called "Our Mixed Kids Still Black?" Right? I do a whole dynamic that is it a legitimate question or the inverse of it. Is the question of is it time for biracial kids to have their own identity or mixed race kids to have their own designation as a distinctive culture? I talk about 6 things that would need to be in place, in my opinion, for that to be a legitimate question. But Hybrid Ninja is actually bringing up a contemporary point, right? That the one drop rule, is it strong enough? Or is it glue? Does it have enough sustainable glue to bond us, right? We used to fall into patterns as to what the society opened up to us for membership pathways. But as the 21st century put out a new kind of question for us, and I wonder what that would look like. Hybrid Ninja says, your experience and expertise is needed today because our numbers are growing and we are not going anywhere. Yeah. We were 9 million. And when I say we, I mean biracial. Hybrid Ninja, in true transparency, I still consider myself Black, even in an overcompensating way for my light skinnedness. But I went through my cultural journey as a man born in 1968, and I realized at the time it's vastly different. A kid born in 2000 has vastly different pressures and opportunities that I had. I had a very small circle. Only 1% of people were designated as biracial in 1970. Today, that's 17%, representing about 33 million people. And at some point, your numbers become of such a swell that you transcend the behaviors and mindset when you're a small percentage of people. All right, Hugh Jones, that's my dad, Josh granddad. Would you share a little insight regarding teens attending predominantly white schools and how to adapt? Right. Like you said, we can't be pushed into boxes where people can't grant access. Oh, no. We can't be pushed into boxes where people grant us group access. We have to create our own institution and safe spaces, right? So Hybrid Ninjas is offering valid critique to my premise, which I believe holds true, that biracial kids at the moment to seek membership into Blackness have to go through peer permission, right? Black peer permission. But in the spirit of self-agency, Hybrid Ninja saying, nah, we don't, that's not empowering. That's not self-agency. to have to go through another group to gain permission, right? And so maybe a future conversation, not only are the numbers of biracial kids growing, but the diversity of biracial kids is also expanding, right? Between Asian other, Hispanic other, white other, black other, right? And so if there were this new cultural immersion of a biracial identity, it would be nuanced between all the two or more races, right? But likely it would start with black white, right? Black white has historically been the dominant conversation, although that's increasingly changing. Personally autonomy. I feel you. I feel you. I like your mind, brother. Big Granddad says, how would you share a little insight regarding teens attending predominantly white institutions? Right. So, one of the main things that parents grapple with, one of the main things that parents grapple with, particularly if they are upwardly mobile, meaning they're generationally changing their educational status, their income status, and they move into suburbs or whatever the case may be, is where do you send your biracial kids or your children of color? Where do you send them to school, right? And unfortunately, in America, there is still this inequity in sort of poor communities, overly populated by people of color. You have poor performance, right? You want your children to have a cultural learning experience, but you're looking at the data, and then you ultimately bump up against, do I have them a cultural experience, or do I take them to a school that's probably diverse in a different kind of way, but not necessarily in a rooted black kind of way? And then you're confronted with this crossroads moment of hypocrisy, right? Especially if you're culturally centered. And so oftentimes, my choice as well, you send your kids to schools that are a little bit more diverse, Asian, small percentage of blacks, small percentage of Latinos, a lot of people from East and white as well. And these diverse settings, at least in the state where I'm from, become their spaces to learn formally, but also to develop friendships and kinships. So if your daughters are going to a predominantly white environment, there's a couple of things you need to do, right? How do you complement what they have proximity to? If you say from wake up to go to sleep, your baby has proximity to these different kinds of cultures, these small representations of the totality of the human family, how do you get them proximity to a black community of young people in a similar age set? And that's where you have to be judicious and diligent in finding communities where your babies can be among a black peer group. That could include um, organizations, that could include club teams. Let me just put it perfectly here. I had my daughter join a Black Girl Scouts troop, right? So she found a community in the space of scouting, but in a black kind of experience. They also had a Mocha Moms, which was a group of mothers who were concerned about their daughter's development, and so they joined together to create community kinds of opportunities, outing kinds of opportunities, chances to experience each other's homes in celebratory kinds of ways. That's high intentionality. A lot of my kids played club sports, and in those club environments, they were exposed to a blackness. But then also in my social circle, especially when they were of a certain age, my peer group, largely an extension of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, we'd get the boys together, the kids together to celebrate birthdays, to come over to the house, to socialize, to interact. And we were intentional about that as to add a complement to predominantly white spaces that they were living in and interacting in for high percentages of time. How do you counter that in ways where they have exposure to a blackness in all of its totality? All right. Great question, Granddad. All right. Hybrid is in this pace. Like you said, we can't. Okay, no. I'm 33, born in 1989. Yes, sir. Things are different today because we hold the cultural torch in society. Okay. Personal autonomy. All right, Hybrid, I see you. Brother, I could bring you up if you want to chop a little bit. Let me know. Um, so join different kind of groups. And then also friendships, we talked about that. But also family, y'all. Family. How do you expose your children to both their sides of their family, right? And hopefully you have a kind of interjoining family where there's cordiality, civility, at least, if not love and genuine in-law interaction. But how do you take your babies and let them experience something that's not um, readily available to them, right? Maybe you live in one state and that's closer to the one parent's kind of family and community, right? So in my case, biracial kid born in 1968, my dad would make sure that I spent time in Gary, Indiana, an all black city at the time where he grew up. And so we would take trips to Gary, Indiana. And there was times where in the summer I would go live with my granddad for about a month or so and experience his, grandparent love, but also experience, Gary, Indiana, a predominantly black city, which was just eye-opening for me as a kid that grew up in military kind of environments and multicultural neighborhoods. And in those trips, I would see cousins, I would see aunties, I would see uncles, and it was a chance to be embraced and loved, thankfully, because of my father was kind of the oldest son. And so through intentionality, buying a plane ticket, setting it up, getting some money in your pocket, sending your child, either going with your child on family trips, or in my case being sent to have an independent coming of age experience in Gary, Indiana. Biracial kids having to play baseball in Gary and just had to traverse the neighborhood and go visit my cousins. These were all culturally rites of passages for me, and tremendously gave me a sense of know and sense of I can manage myself in diverse kind of environments, and that became a personal kind of cachet for me that I truly am indebted for. But it was through intentional family exposure kinds of opportunities, and it hit me. It taught me how different communities move, how they live, certain circumstances that target or plague certain communities based upon history and those kind of things. And it was very enlightening for me and further entrenched myself as a biracial kid trying to make a decision as to which culture did I want dominantly to be a part of my life. And I wanted to side with a cultural community of resiliency, tenacity, one that was sort of always mindful of spirit and soul, and was to me the conscious of the nation, and I wanted to kind of pathway in that regard. Let me see. I'm getting ready to wind down here, beautiful family. We are getting close to the hour. I want to send a special shout out to D Chap. Hopefully, you're getting some sleep. I know you're in China. Granddad, thank you so much for the questions. You figured out how to get them in here. Appreciate that. And Hybrid Ninjas, good to see you, brother. I'm going to put my email up here. If there's anything you want to maybe send me, we can chop offline. Maybe we could plan a future show together and we could talk about the intergenerational dynamics in the space. I like your voice around personal agency, personal autonomy. I don't know if that'll happen or if the time is right now, but I think the numbers are significantly going to raise different voices, coupled with the academics are writing and studying about it. And so they're beginning to tell distinctive stories around various variables unique to biracial kids. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. But I welcome the intergenerational conversation that's needed. We can't ask the same question in 1968 that we do in 2020 or in 1980 when brother was born, right? Change is inevitable and it's beneficial. The ancestors asked certain questions, and today as a society, we are better for it. Questions were asked in my generation, and today's generation is better for it. Today's generation also has its new questions. It is not a threat to my generation nor to a disrespect to the ancestors. It is a simple fact that as human beings get closer and racialized lines become less rigid and people move into urban corridors and discover each other in different kinds of ways, inevitably like, love, and marriage will come out of that. We're seeing that. And in 1968, the percentage that of people saw legitimacy in interracial marriages was about 20%. Today in 2020, that is 94%. This thing is here. These people are going to get together. They're going to produce babies, and we will have more and more biracial, multiracial kids. And it is a question that the young people are asking. I still believe, just as you need to have a balance and love for both your parental communities and culture, given the phenotype, the representation of blackness in biracial black-white kids, there's a healthy understanding and I believe legitimacy in knowing, connecting, and being of a black cultural experience that you then move through into your next phases of life, right? It's an undeniable fact, something to grapple with and contend with. So, however you identify, beautiful, love all that you are, and also decide what is it that you want to be a part of, because cultural community within your social circles is critically important to how you evolve and development to ultimately what J4 Conversation is about, producing healthy, grounded, independent young men. All right. On that note, thank you guys so much for joining us. Truly appreciate you rolling with me. On behalf of J4 Conversations, y'all, have a wonderful Sunday. Go over to YouTube, give us a subscribe, a like, share outwardly. Let's help the community grow. We'll do more on the biracial space. Love, love, love.